Let us begin with a dangerous secret, a truth so contrary to the gospels of our sentimental age that it must be spoken in a whisper. The universe is divided into two kinds of creatures, the hungry and the fed, and desire, that beautiful, amoral, and utterly ruthless goddess, is a cannibal. It does not feed the hungry, it eats them. Your neediness, your plea to be loved, the thousand subtle and not so subtle ways you beg for her affection, this is not a sign of your romantic soul. It is the rattling of a leper's bell. It is the scent of a hungry ghost. It is a broadcast of your own spiritual famine. And it is the most effective repellent for human desire ever devised. Machiavelli, a man who saw human relations not as a romance but as a series of brutal, elegant equations of power, understood this law in his bones. The prince who begs for an alliance is a prince who will be given chains. The man who begs for love is a man who will be given contempt, beautifully wrapped in the silks of pity. Why? Because the act of begging is a confession. It is a unilateral declaration of your own inferiority. It is an admission that you are empty and you need her to fill you. It is to surrender your own sovereignty and to ask her, the other absolute monarch of her own life, to take on the tedious, unrewarding, and deeply unerotic job of becoming your zookeeper. Imagine a wolf, lean, silent, powerful. Its eyes are not pleading, they are assessing. Its hunger is not a weakness. It is the engine of its deadly focus. It does not beg the deer to be eaten. It hunts. Now, imagine a stray dog whining at the kitchen door of a great house. It is gaunt, its ribs showing, its eyes are wide with a pathetic, pleading need. Both creatures are hungry. One inspires a primal, fearful respect. The other inspires a fleeting, dismissive pity. Desire, in its heart of hearts, always chooses the wolf. You have been meticulously trained by a culture of comfort to be the dog. In the forgotten folklore of the Carpathian Mountains, they tell of a creature called the pustosh, the empty one. It was a spirit that had no substance of its own, only a terrible gnawing hunger for the vitality of others. It would appear at a lover's window not as a monster, but as a beautiful, tragic figure, its eyes full of a profound and bottomless need. It would not ask for their life or their soul. It would just ask to be let in, to be warmed by their fire, to be fed a crumb of their affection. But the moment it was granted entry, the moment it felt the first touch of pity, the house would grow cold, the fires would dim. The vitality of the occupant would begin to drain away, siphoned off to feed the creature's infinite emptiness. The pustosh was a parasite that disguised itself as a supplicant. Your neediness is that beautiful, tragic face at the window. When you beg, when you send that third unanswered text, when you demand reassurance of her feelings, when you contort your own principles to win her approval, you are revealing that you are a hungry ghost, and her deepest, most ancient survival instincts, the ones that have been honed for 1,000,000 years to detect parasites and predators, will sound a silent, screaming alarm. She may not know why she feels a sudden, cold revulsion. She may even feel guilty for it, but she will feel it. Desire dies at the first scent of the void. The stark, almost impossible hope in this bleak diagnosis is to begin the great work of learning to feed yourself. The liberation is not in learning how to beg more cleverly. It is in the slow, arduous, and profoundly solitary process of building a life, a soul, a kingdom so rich and so satisfying that you are no longer hungry for the scraps from another's table. So, I ask you, with the cold diagnostic gaze of a man who knows the scent of a hungry ghost because he has been one, look at your last interaction with her. The words you said, the things you did. Now, be honest, with a brutality that makes your own skin crawl. Were you the wolf, moving with the quiet confidence of your own power? Or were you the dog, whining at a closed door, hoping that this time someone might be kind enough to let you in? The moment she grants you what you have begged for, she can no longer see you as an equal. She sees you as a subject. I have seen it in the sad, hopeful eyes of men who believe they have just won a great victory. She has finally answered his third text. She has agreed to the date he pleaded for. She has given him the reassurance he so desperately craved. He feels a surge of triumphant relief. He does not understand that he has not won a victory, he has just been granted an audience. And in doing so, the entire nature of their reality has been irrevocably changed. This is the second and more poisonous truth of this savage law. The act of begging does not just reveal your weakness, it fundamentally redefines the relationship into one of master and supplicant. The moment she gives you the affection you have begged for, it ceases to be a gift between equals. It becomes an act of charity. And the emotion she feels for you is no longer desire, it is pity. And pity, my friend, is the beautiful velvet-gloved hand that holds the dagger of contempt. You cannot desire what you pity. You can care for it. You can feel responsible for it. You can even, in a strange maternal way, love it. But you cannot feel the raw, amoral, and deeply respectful pull of true desire for a creature you see as lesser than yourself. The act of begging is a willing and enthusiastic descent to a lower rung on the ladder of power. You are forcing her onto a throne, kneeling at her feet, and then acting surprised when she begins to treat you like one of her subjects. Machiavelli would see this not as a romantic dynamic, but as a political catastrophe. A prince who rules not by his own strength, but by the charitable goodwill of a more powerful neighboring state, is not a prince at all. He is a puppet, a governor of a client state. His every action is contingent on the approval of his patron. He may be safe for a time, but he is not free, and he is not respected. Your begging for her love makes you the governor of a client state, and your heart is the occupied territory. Nietzsche, who understood the psychology of power with a terrifying clarity, saw pity as the most decadent and life-denying of all emotions. It is a secret celebration of one's own strength, enjoyed through the spectacle of another's weakness. When she pities you, she is not truly feeling your pain. She is feeling a pleasant, virtuous sense of her own magnanimity in the face of your pathetic need. You have made yourself the backdrop for her own quiet, noble drama. In the decadent folklore of the late Byzantine court, they told of an empress who collected broken things. She had a bird with a broken wing, a three-legged wolfhound, and a court poet who was a brilliant but emotionally crippled man, racked with insecurities. She adored him. She called him her little broken nightingale. She would listen to his sad poems, she would soothe his anxieties, she would protect him from the harsh realities of the court. He, in turn, worshipped her for her compassion. He wrote his greatest works for her, but she never allowed him to heal. When he showed a sign of strength, of confidence, she would subtly remind him of his fragility, of how much he needed her protection. For if the broken nightingale were to ever heal and learn to fly, he might fly away from the beautiful, gilded cage of her pity. You are that broken nightingale, and your constant need for her reassurance, for her validation, is you begging her to keep the door of the cage locked. The faint, stark hope in this bleak arrangement is to learn to see her pity not as a comfort, but as the most profound insult you could ever receive. It is to develop a violent, allergic reaction to being seen as a project, a charity case, a wounded thing to be managed. The liberation is in the terrifying realization that it is better to be hated for your strength than to be loved for your weakness. This requires you to commit what will feel like an act of profound ingratitude. It is the act of refusing her help, of rejecting her soothing, of turning away from her comforting pity, and choosing instead the cold, hard, and lonely path of your own self-reliance. It is the moment that the broken bird begins to beat its one good wing against the bars of the cage. Not because it hates the caregiver, but because the instinct to be free is more powerful than the desire to be safe. So, I ask you, you who have felt so grateful for her kindness, for her patience with your flaws, the affection she gives you after you have revealed your need, is it the passionate embrace of an equal, or is it the gentle, condescending pat on the head one gives to a loyal and broken creature? And which one, in the silent, honest darkness of your own heart, do you truly want to be? You do not need to speak to be a beggar. Your constant, anxious orbit is its own plea for scraps. I am going to tell you a secret that the loud, obvious beggars will never understand. The most common, most repulsive, and most desire-destroying form of begging is completely silent. It is a plea made not with the mouth, but with the body, with time, with the very trajectory of your life. It is the unspoken plea of the man who orbits. You believe that because you are not saying the needy words, you are not a beggar. You are a fool, deceiving no one but yourself. You are the silent panhandler of the soul, and your neediness radiates from you like a sickly sweet perfume. What is this silent begging? It is the man who is always available, the man whose schedule is a perpetually open question, waiting to be filled by her whim. It is the man who is always the first to view her online story, the first to like her post, a digital ghost haunting the periphery of her life, hoping his silent, constant attention will be mistaken for strength. It is the man who puts his own life, his own mission, on hold, waiting in the antechamber of her world, hoping she will one day grant him an audience. He does not speak his need, but his every action, his every priority, his very existence, screams it to the heavens. You are the center of my universe. Without you, I am a cold, dead rock. Machiavelli, a man who understood that a prince's time and presence were his most valuable assets, would be appalled by this squandering of sovereignty. A prince does not orbit his allies or his enemies. He has his own capital, his own court, his own affairs of state. He is a center of gravity in his own right. The man who orbits a woman is a man who has confessed that he has no kingdom of his own. He is a lord without a castle, a general without an army. He is a title without a territory. And there is nothing less compelling than a king with no kingdom. In the ancient fatalistic myths of the Celts, they spoke of the Ankou, the ghost of the last person to die in a parish, who was forced to become the servant of death for the next year. He did not speak. He did not threaten. He would simply appear, a silent, skeletal figure, and his presence alone was an omen of doom. He was a creature with no will of its own, a slave to a greater power. The man who silently orbits a woman, his movements dictated by her location, his happiness dictated by her mood, becomes a kind of Ankou. He is a ghost haunting a life that is not his own, a servant to the gravitational pull of a will that has mastered his. You must understand this. Desire is a predator, and predators are, above all, obsessed with vitality, with life force. They are drawn to the creature that is most alive. The silent beggar, the orbiter, is radiating the opposite of vitality. He is radiating a void. His constant anxious presence is not a sign of his devotion. It is a sign of his own emptiness. He is a black hole, and her deepest, most primal instincts will command her to flee before she is pulled into his lifeless orbit. The faint, almost impossible hope in this bleak picture is the power of a single, decisive movement, the act of turning away. It is the moment that the moon, in an act of impossible rebellion, decides to break its orbit and fly off to become its own planet. It is the act of choosing your own trajectory. It is to consciously and deliberately fill your own time, your own life, with your own mission, so that you are no longer available to be her satellite. This is not a tactic. It is a fundamental reordering of your universe. You must find a sun that is your own, your work, your art, your purpose, and you must begin to orbit it with the same desperate, obsessive energy you once gave to her. You must become so consumed by your own flight path that you cease to even notice whether she is following. This is the only thing that can ever truly command her respect. She will feel the shift in your gravity. She will feel you pull away, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the magnificent, terrifying indifference of a celestial body that has found its own, true course. And she will be left with a choice to watch you disappear into the darkness or to begin for the first time to adjust her own orbit to match yours. So, I ask you, with the cold, clear eye of an astronomer, look at the map of your own life for the past month. Where have you been? What have you done? Was it the path of a man walking toward his own destiny? Or was it the predictable, pathetic, and perfectly circular orbit of a moon that has forgotten it was once a star? A man with a full plate does not need to beg for the crumbs from another's table. Imagine two men in a time of great famine. The first man is a beggar. He spends his days going from door to door, his voice a pathetic whine, his hands outstretched, pleading for a crust of bread. His entire existence is a reaction to the hunger in his own belly and the mercy in the hearts of others. The second man is not a beggar, he is a farmer. While the famine raged, he did not plead to the heavens. He took his last few seeds, walked to a hidden, forgotten patch of land by a river, and with his own two hands, in solitude and silence, he worked. He broke the hard soil, he carried the water, he guarded his small crop from the crows. Now his granary is full. He is hosting a feast. And the same people who once might have pitied the beggar now come to the farmer, their eyes wide with a desperate, hungry respect. The entire Machiavellian code, the entire dark art of power, can be distilled into one simple and life-altering directive. Stop being the beggar and start being the farmer. The savage law is that desire dies the moment you beg. The powerful corollary is this: desire is born from the spectacle of a man who has absolutely nothing to beg for. The ultimate antidote to the weakness of need is the profound, unshakable, and deeply attractive power of self-sufficiency. You have been operating under a false premise. You have been trying to solve the problem of your own hunger by becoming a more clever and persuasive beggar. You have been learning the right words, the right techniques, the right strategies to convince her to share a piece of her feast with you, and it is all wasted effort. The true solution is to turn your back on her table entirely and begin the long, hard, and glorious work of cultivating your own harvest. Machiavelli knew that a prince who was dependent on another's treasury or another's army was not a prince at all. He was a glorified slave. The first and most important task of any ruler is to secure his own state, to build his own army, to fill his own treasury. His power, his freedom, his very survival depends on his own resources. A man's life is his state. His skills, his purpose, his financial independence, his physical strength, his intellectual depth, this is his treasury. The man who begs for love is a man with an empty treasury, trying to secure a loan from a notoriously fickle foreign power. In the parched, sun-scorched myths of ancient Sumeria, they told of a land whose people were dying of thirst. They spent all their days performing elaborate rituals to the sky god, Anu, begging him for rain. Their priests grew fat on sacrifices, and the people grew thin on hope. But one man, an outcast named Enki, ignored the rituals. He took a sharpened spade and began to walk the barren land, studying the contours of the earth, the patterns of the dry riverbeds. The priests condemned him as a heretic. The people mocked his foolish, lonely labor. For 7 years, he dug a single, impossibly deep well. And on the first day of the 8th year, he struck a great hidden underground river. His well erupted, creating a lush green oasis in the heart of the wasteland. The sky god remained silent. The priests were revealed as frauds, and the entire tribe was forced to abandon their useless rituals and come, as humble supplicants, to the man they had scorned, begging for the water he had created not through prayer, but through his own relentless, solitary, and sovereign effort. You must stop praying for rain. You must pick up your spade and start digging your own well. Your well is your purpose, your mission, your obsession. It is the business you build, the art you create, the body you forge, the knowledge you acquire. It is the hard, thankless, and often invisible labor that you do for yourself and for yourself alone. This is the great work, and it is in the doing of this work that the alchemy happens. Your neediness, your hunger for her validation, begins to evaporate, burned away by the heat of your own forge. You become so consumed with the joy and the struggle of your own harvest that you forget you were ever starving. This is the state of having a full hand. It is the quiet, calm, and deeply centered energy of a man who is nourished from within. He enters a room not with the anxious, grasping energy of the beggar, but with the calm, benevolent energy of the farmer who has come to share his surplus. His conversation is not a plea for approval. It is an offering of his own interesting thoughts. His time is not a commodity he gives away to the highest bidder of affection. It is a precious resource he invests with care. The strange, magnificent hope in this is that it is a path to a power that is truly your own. It cannot be taken from you. It is not contingent on her mood, or her presence, or the state of your relationship. It is the power of your own competence. And this power, this energy of a man who is a source, not a drain, is the most powerful aphrodisiac in the known universe. You will not have to beg for her desire. Your own abundance will make you the feast she is starving for. So I ask you, with the simple, direct question of a farmer to a man staring at an empty field, what seeds are you planting? What ground are you breaking? What is the hard, lonely, and sacred work you are doing today to ensure that tomorrow you will be the one hosting the feast and not the one begging for an invitation? The man who needs nothing is the only one whose gifts are not a bribe. And so, we have come to the end of this dark and lonely road. We have seen that to beg is to announce your own famine, a scent that repels all desire. We have seen that the plea for love is a strategic catastrophe that places you in the pathetic role of a supplicant, worthy only of a contemptuous pity. We have seen that even the silent, anxious orbit of a hopeful man is a quiet scream of neediness. We have understood the brutal, necessary wisdom of the farmer, of the king at his own feast, of the man who turns his back on the tables of others to cultivate his own magnificent harvest. You have learned the great and terrible secret of Machiavelli's law. You must annihilate your own need. And now, at the summit of this cold and lonely mountain of self-sufficiency, we find the final, most beautiful, and most paradoxical truth of all. The man who has successfully killed his own hunger, the man who has built a kingdom so rich that he needs nothing from the outside world, is the only man who is finally and truly free to love. This is the ultimate inversion of the law. For the entirety of this journey, we have treated love and desire as a political battlefield, a game of power, a thing to be won or lost. But that is only the truth for the man who is still a beggar. When you are no longer starving, the feast is no longer a conquest. It is simply a meal, and you can choose to share it. The love of a needy man is a transaction. It is a desperate bribe. He gives his affection, his time, his resources, not as a pure gift, but as a down payment on a future return. He is always, on some level, calculating. If I give her this, will she give me the affection I crave? His generosity is a form of begging in disguise. It is a hook, baited with the flesh of his own kindness. And the other person, on a deep, instinctual level, can always feel the sharp point beneath the soft bait. But the love of the man who has his own feast, the man who is a king in his own right, that is a different thing entirely. It is not a transaction, it is a surplus. It is the overflow of a river that is already full. He gives his time, his attention, his strength, not because he needs anything in return, but because he has so much of it that to give it away is a joy, an expression of his own magnificent abundance. His affection is not a bribe, it is a grant. It is unconditional. And because it is unconditional, because it asks for nothing in return, it is the most powerful and irresistible force in the human universe. Think of the sun. The sun does not shine on the earth because it needs the earth to love it back. It does not withhold its warmth as a negotiating tactic. The sun shines because it is a star, and the nature of a star is to radiate light and heat. Its generosity is an effortless, non-negotiable, and completely indifferent byproduct of its own magnificent, self-contained existence. It is the ultimate king, giving a gift that costs it nothing, and in doing so, it creates and sustains the entire solar system. When you have built your own inner kingdom, you become the sun. Your love is no longer the pathetic, flickering candle of the beggar, trying to attract a moth. It is the steady, radiant, and unconditional light of a star. This is the state that transcends Machiavelli. The prince is always, on some level, a strategist, a player in the game. But the man who has achieved this final state of being is no longer a player. He is the source of the light by which the game is played. He can now be truly kind, without his kindness being mistaken for weakness. He can now be truly generous, without his generosity being seen as a plea. He has earned the right to his own virtues because they are no longer tactics. They are simply expressions of his own, unshakable and overflowing reality. So, this is the final, haunting paradox. The savage law is that desire dies the moment you beg. The divine corollary is that a love that does not need to beg is eternal. You must go through the cold, Machiavellian winter of self-reliance and strategic solitude to arrive at the warm, magnanimous summer of a truly powerful heart. You must become a ruthless king so that you can finally learn to be a benevolent God. And so, I leave you with this final, quiet question. The affection you offer to the world, the love you give, is it the desperate, calculated investment of a beggar who is terrified of his own emptiness? Or is it the effortless, radiant, and unconditional warmth of a star that is on fire with the joy of its own magnificent and solitary existence?